Hi, everybody. So this is part two of the 40 prompts for your Book of Shadows and your grimoire or your magical journal, whatever you want to call it. I'm just looking at my list here. So I was on 18 where I was talking about like gender, sexuality, that kind of thing. Another thing is like sitting cross-legged in some ceremonies and is considered to be the way men are allowed to sit, and in a lot of Native American ceremonies, women are not allowed to sit cross-legged. They have to sit in a different position. So, what do we do if somebody identifies as being male or female gender, but that's not what they were born with? You know what I mean? Like they weren't physically born as a male or physically born as a female. So like even sitting in a ceremony could be challenging for somebody that is transgender, for instance. And then can that be accommodated for them? Yes or no? Have you found acceptance in the community regarding your gender, your sexuality? Yes or no? How did that make you feel, and what was it specifically that was the challenge? And then how did that impact you in your spiritual path or your spiritual growth, or your connection to that community? Did you feel shunned? Did you feel supported? Was it like no big deal? It was like, yeah, okay, sit where you feel you belong. um, are there certain elders that you've worked with that are more accepting, and they're like, yeah, okay, if that's how you identify, then you sit with whoever you feel that's where you belong with? Or did you meet resistance or judgment, that kind of thing? So document all that. Number 19, shape shifting. So a lot of cultures around the world uh, believe in shape shifting. A lot of modern day folks um, believe that shapeshifting was only done on an astral level, and they don't believe in physical shapeshifting. Whereas in certain cultures and certain belief systems, it is very much believed that people have had the ability or do have the ability to literally shapeshift into other animals or other things. So, is that something that's part of your practice, your belief system? Why or why not? 20, astral projection. So, uh, soul travel, spirit travel. Have you done it? Has anybody in your family done it? My grandmother used to do it without even trying to. And two of my sons also do it. I personally don't think I've done it, although people have seen me. Like, for instance, when my uncle was dying from lung cancer, and I had come home from work and I was really tired because, like, the day before I was like up at the hospital, then I had to go to work the next day. So I came home and I was like, I gotta go see my uncle, but I need to have a nap. Like, I'm so tired. So then I lay down for like an hour or two and then thought I'd get up and then go to the hospital. Meanwhile, at the hospital in the parking lot, my mom and two of my cousins, at the same time that I was sleeping, and like remember, like before I went to sleep, I was like, I gotta go up to the hospital, I gotta go see my uncle. So I go and I lay down. At the time when I was sleeping, there were three people that saw me. My mom and two cousins saw me literally, and it was me. It wasn't like somebody that kind of looked like me. They saw me walk into the hospital, and they were calling out to me, but I just like didn't hear them or whatever. And they were like, what's wrong with her? Maybe she didn't hear us or whatever, but they were calling out. But they saw me literally walk right into the hospital. And they came in soon after, and like I vanished. And then when I showed up, uh, they were they were really shocked because they were like, where did you go? Like, you were just here, and then we were calling you, and then we figured you'd be here in the room with Uncle, and we get here and like you're not even here. And I was like, I literally just got here. I was sleeping. So that was like one experience I've had. My two youngest children have had that ability. My middle son started when he was about maybe 7 years old or so. And then my youngest, he was in his teens when it started happening with him. So some people kind of have that natural ability to do that. Others can control it more. They can learn how to do it through different techniques and that kind of thing. So is that something you believe in? Yes or no? Is it something you've done? What were your experiences? Number 21. Are children allowed into your ceremonies? Why or why not? Some of our ceremonies, children are not allowed to attend. And there's reasons for that. It could be frightening and very scary for kids, especially if we're like summoning certain entities or spirits, and it could be extremely scary for the child. So is that something that you've incorporated into your practice? Or do you think, nope, they can come to every single ceremony? And when I'm talking about ceremonies, I'm not talking just about like Sabbats or anything. I'm talking about like there's certain ceremonies that kids are just not allowed to attend. So like ceremonies of darkness, for instance, kids are not allowed to attend that. Number 22, vegetarianism at traditional feasts. This, I had an interesting talk about this. So recently, I've stopped eating meat. I've done videos on that. And it's raised some questions because a lot of traditional feasts that I go to with regards to like my cultural side, there's a big focus on meat and like wild game like deer and stuff like that. And all the soups, there's meat in all the soups that are served. And like, how does that impact you? You're expected to eat food that is served to you because you're eating for the dead. And it literally helps to give them strength. That's what the belief is you eat the food in honor of the dead. It helps to, and plus you give offerings for them and all that. So if you don't eat meat, how do you deal with that? Because some people might think you're being rude if you're not eating what's being served. So how do you reconcile that? What are the implications? What are the cultural protocols for that? I would literally just put the soup in a container and, I bring it home and my kids still eat meat. So it's like, here you go, boys. Here's some soup for you. I'll eat the bannock and I'll eat the choke cherries and, the fruits and that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to eat the meat. And I'm not going to eat the soup that has the meat in it. That's just not what I'm going to do. So, yeah, has that had an impact? And it's so weird because it's like the culture I grew up is very much like hunter-gatherer. So like, yeah, it poses some interesting, unique implications that I never thought I'd ever have to deal with. So it's interesting. Number 23, pregnancy and babies or young children are not allowed at certain ceremonies and practices. So for instance, if a woman is pregnant or she has a young baby, they would not be allowed at some of our traditional wakes. It is believed that the spirits of the dead and other spirits are kind of drawn to those things, and with the baby being inside of her, it could affect her baby and it could affect her. So it's understood that if you're pregnant, you stay away from that. Same thing if you have really young children, especially once it gets dark. then you take your kids, because normally the wakes go like 24 hours and they can last anywhere between 1 to 4 days. So young children really aren't part of that process. However, I'd say within the last 25 years or so, 20 years, that has changed. You do see more children now at wakes, and at the funerals. Sometimes it cannot be helped, but just to be aware that sometimes it does cause the children distress. We believe that they're innocent and they can see things that maybe we can't see, and it can be very scary for some kids. So you may or may not have that as part of your practice. 24. Have you experienced or witnessed racism or discrimination in ceremonies and groups? I have, and it was actually really shocking. There's been certain rituals I've gone to, ceremonies I've gone to, where they'll use like the colors of the 4 races, so like red, white, yellow, black, in the form of cloth or ribbons, and then they talk about the 4 races and everything. And yet if somebody from one of those 4 races shows up that is not part of that person's specific race, they're like not welcome. And it's like, I've got a big issue with that, because it's like, well, then why are you trying to include that particular person's race representing their color? Let's say, I don't know, let's say they're Caucasian, and you have the white cloth there, or the white ribbon there, to represent our Caucasian brothers and sisters. But if they come to our ceremony, you get upset by that. Or if they happen to be black, or if they happen to be Asian, or whatever. And I've actually challenged some people on that, because the way I see it, if you're going to be doing a ceremony and you're representing these 4 races through ribbon or cloth, then really technically that's an invitation to people from those other races to be there. And how can you include something that symbolizes their race but exclude them from the ceremony? That's not right. And if that's the way you're going to be, then do not include those colors to represent those races, because you're being exclusionary and yet trying to include it. The way I see it, that's being a hypocrite. But that's just me. I've seen other things too, where somebody might use a technique, or I guess it kind of goes to the cultural appropriation thing. But it's like, if you use something or you borrow something from another culture and implement it into your own practice, but you use it because, or you're not taught how to use it the way it was meant to be. Maybe you just read a few New Age type books and you're like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to implement it and this is how I'm going to do it. But you don't have like the cultural background or understanding of it, then it can create some friction if there's people from that culture that show up and they're like, oh, wait a minute. Not sure if you know this, but, and then they try to educate you, and then maybe you get really offended by it. Or vice versa, maybe they get really offended by it. So just be aware of that too. Number 25, what is your go-to method for grounding? So what is one method that absolutely works for you every time? 26, what is your most powerful protection spell or ritual, and has it ever failed you? 27, what was the most terrifying, spiritual, religious, magical experience you've ever had? Something that terrified you and shook you to your core. 28, what was the most awe-inspiring, magical, spiritual, religious experience you've ever had? 29, Are there any family recipes that you can incorporate into your practice, for instance, regarding ancestral uh, honoring or worship? So maybe you have, your great grandmother's favorite recipe for whatever. Is that something you can incorporate into your spiritual practice when you do like um, ancestor worship or honoring the ancestors or feeding the ancestors? Maybe you make that, I don't know, let's say she had a spice cake recipe that was like her favorite thing. And maybe you make that as a form of offering and honoring her. And maybe you put some of that out on an altar for her, that kind of thing. Is that something you can incorporate into your practice if you haven't already? 30. Do you regularly feed your dead? And if so, what types of foods do you leave out for them? Now, some tribes that I know, if somebody is deceased, they will have a feast for 4 years after that person has died, and they will serve the foods, like they serve like these traditional type foods, as well as whatever that person's favorite foods were when that person was alive. So if they loved pizza, they would have pizza there, or if they loved a certain type of vegetable or a certain kind of meat or whatever, they would incorporate that person's favorite foods as part of this feast that they would have for the 4 years following that person's death, as a way to honor them and incorporate them. Is that something you do? Is that something you think, hey, that's kind of a neat idea? My mom loved cabbage rolls, and so I think when I, at Samhain, when I want to honor her because she's crossed over, maybe I'll always like make a little batch of cabbage rolls and I'll put out a cabbage roll just for her. I think she would love that, and other foods as well. Is that something you might want to incorporate? 31. Do you have any rituals that honor the unborn generations? So there is one teaching that any decision that you make, you need to remember or think about how this will impact, the next 7 generations yet to come. And if it's going to have a negative impact on the next 7 generations, then you do not do it. And it gets you to think ahead, and not just for your own self, for your own gain or your own benefit, or just for your own immediate family. It really gets you to think further ahead, like, how will this impact the next 7 generations yet to come? Or sometimes if you're in some sort of, for instance, when I used to dance at powwows, I'd be in a constant state of prayer. So I would pray for generations that haven't even been born yet. I would pray for people that have already passed away. I'd pray for the sick and all that kind of stuff. So do you incorporate that into your practice? Why or why not? What is your legacy? Do you know what it is? If you were to die tomorrow, like, what would you want to leave this world? Would you want it to be hopefully a little bit better of a place than when you first came here? What is your legacy? Do you have one? If you feel that you really, well, I don't think I really have a legacy. Is that something, that you can start thinking about? Like, let's say you're 20 some years old and you're just starting out in life and you're like, I don't know what my legacy is, but I sure hope that when I do leave this world that, I can pass down some wisdom to my kids or my grandkids. Or what if you don't have children? Can you still have a legacy? Of course you can. And what is that? Maybe you have a vast library and you want to donate that to, your, I don't know, local library, or you want to donate it to your local prison, or maybe you want to hand down your grimoire, because you don't have kids, to maybe a niece or a nephew or something. What is your legacy? Think about that. 33. Do you believe in angelic beings? Why or why not? 34. Has your practice become dogmatic, or does it continue to grow and evolve? Why or why not? 35. Do you believe in reincarnation? Have you had any experiences about that? Do you also believe in ancestral honoring? And do those two belief systems, do they conflict with each other? How do you reconcile the different kind of beliefs with regards to, say, reincarnation and honoring your ancestors? 36. Document your family's ghost stories and your own if you happen to have any. 37. And it doesn't just have to be your family's ghost stories. It could be like ghost stories from your area, your specific town, or city. Do you have any famous ones that you might want to include? 37. Are you willing to teach others about your own path? Why or why not? 38. Do you have rituals or any ways that deal with the dark shadow side of society? So do you have any rituals that deal with abuse, addictions, murder, rape, kidnapping, human trafficking, even things more minor like commercialism? So do you have any rituals or spell work that deals with those kind of things? 39. Do you have any micro rituals? So something that's so small that maybe you can do it on your way to work. It could be something like chewing a piece of gum as you drive to work, to kind of get into a bit of a, not a meditative state, because you need to be aware as you're driving, but to kind of get you into this state of transcendence, I guess you can say. It could be, for instance, with me when I was younger, one of the first things I did every day, and I still do this sometimes, providing my windows aren't frozen shut, but every day, whenever I would wake up, I'd open up my bedroom window and I would just breathe in that cool, fresh air every single day. It didn't matter if it was winter time or if it was summertime. I would just, do that 3 or 4 times. I'm not sure. Can you hear the wind whistling and howling? It's awesome. But I would do that, and it was just a way for me to, greet the day. Like, do you have anything like that where it's just something kind of quick, easy? I'd maybe do that for breathe in 3, 4 times, and then I'd go about my day. Do you have any kind of those micro rituals that are so you can do them very quickly, here or there, anywhere kind of thing? It only takes maybe not even a minute. Document that. And last but not least, 40. Have you done any shadow seasonal work? So for me, my shadow season is winter. It is the one season that I do not care for. So that is my shadow season. So I like to work with that and incorporate that into my practice, because that lets me know that, hey, if there's something I really dislike about that's part of my shadow side. What is it about it that I don't like? Well, it's cold. What does that mean for me? I can be cold too. If I feel that, maybe I've reached a point with certain people, I can be very cold and kind of cut that person out of my life. And, that's it, right? What else does it mean? Well, it can also be a standstill. I don't like that, because to me it's like I like going places and doing different things, and I like, that exploring kind of adventurous side comes out. And with winter, it's kind of like, you gotta kind of stay put. And I don't like that. But what can that teach me? Well, it could teach me about looking within, doing a lot of self-reflection. So I can work through that that shadow season. And so yeah, so what is your shadow season, and can you implement some work where you can start working with your shadow side by working with your shadow season? Make sense? Yes, no? So those are my 40 prompts, 40 ideas for your magical journal, your grimoire, your book of shadows. And that's pretty much it for now. So have a nice day, everybody. We'll see you later. Ciao.